All right, welcome. In this explainer, we're going to break down the U.S. tax system for international students and researchers. Our goal is to give you a really clear blueprint for handling it, and we're going to zero in on one super important form, the W-8DN. So here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with the default problem, which is a 30% tax withholding. Then we'll get into the tools you need, your tax ID, and that W-8DN form. After that, we'll look at the huge advantage of tax treaties. And finally, we'll see how it all comes together when it's time to file your taxes. Okay, so you did it. You got a scholarship to study in the US. First off, that's amazing. But then, maybe you hear this rumor that the IRS might want to keep a whopping 30% of it. What's that all about? Let's dig in and figure out why that happens, and more importantly, what you can do about it. All right, let's start with that 30% withholding. To really solve this problem, you first have to understand why it's the automatic, out-of-the-box setting for any foreign person who gets paid from a U.S. source. Okay, first things first, let's get the language right. In the eyes of the IRS, if you're not a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, you're what's called a non-resident alien. Simple enough. And the university or institution paying you, they're the withholding agent. Think of them as the gatekeeper. They are legally required to hold back taxes on your behalf. And here it is, the big role. The U.S. tax system has this automatic setting. Any money from a U.S. source that's paid to a foreign person gets hit with a 30% withholding tax. It's the default. If you don't do anything, this is what happens. It's really just a simple way for the IRS to make sure they collect taxes from people who might not be in the country long term. So how do you change that default setting? Well, the very first thing you need is a key to even interact with the system, an official U.S. tax ID number. But the big question is, which one do you need? An SSN or an ITIN? And this is a really, really important distinction. A Social Security number, or SSN, is all about being authorized to work in the United States. But an ITIN, an individual taxpayer identification number, that's just for taxes. It has nothing to do with employment. Think of it as your unique account number with the IRS, and that's it. And here's the bottom line for most of you watching. If you're here to study on a visa like an F1 or a J1, and you don't have authorization to work, you just plain can't get an SSN. It's not an option. So your only path forward for tax purposes is to get an ITIN. Okay, so how do you get an ITIN if you're not even filing taxes yet? Good question. The IRS has a special pathway for this. It's called Exception 2C for scholarship recipients. Here's the playbook. You need your official award letter, a special letter from your school's official, your DSO or RO, that basically says you can't get an SSN, and you fill out a Form W-7. You package all that up with your documents and send it to the IRS. All right, so you've got your ITIN. That's your key. Now you need your shield. And that shield is a form called the W-8DEN. This is your proactive tool to stop that 30% withholding before it even starts. So what's this form all about? Well, it does three really important jobs. First, you're officially telling your university, hey, I'm not a US person. Second, you're saying, yep, this scholarship money is for me. And third, and this is the big one, it's how you can claim a lower tax rate or maybe even a zero tax rate if there's a tax treaty between your country and the US. And don't just take my word for it. This quote is right from the IRS instructions. It basically says if you don't hand in this form when we ask for it, we have to assume the worst and take 30%. The cause and effect here is crystal clear. No form, more tax. Simple as that. Okay, now we get to what I like to call the power-up in this whole game, tax treaties. These are special agreements the US has with a lot of other countries. And believe me, they can completely change your tax situation for the better. Well, let's make this real with an example straight from the IRS. You've got two students, same exact scholarship, 35 grand. A big chunk of that goes to tuition, which isn't taxed. But they both have $9,000 left for things like room and board, and that part is taxable. Now for the student whose country has no treaty, they owe tax on that $9 grand. But look at the student with a treaty. Poof, that taxable income goes to zero. A tax treaty literally erased their tax bill. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. This amazing benefit doesn't just happen automatically. Your university isn't a mind reader. You have to proactively claim it. And how do you do that? You guessed it. You fill out that Form W-8BEN. That's how you turn the treaty on for your account. All right, we're at the last piece of the puzzle, filing your taxes. This is where you square everything up for the year. You reconcile what you were paid, what tax was held, and what you actually owe. It's the final tally. The form you're looking for is the 1040-NR. See that NR? It stands for non-resident. It's totally different from the form US citizens use, and it's built just for people in your situation. So, why even bother filing? Well, this is your chance to talk directly to the IRS. You report your income, you officially claim your treaty benefits on the record, and you figure out what you actually owe. But here's the best part. If your school withheld too much money during the year, this is how you get it back. It's your path to a refund. Now, one last piece of paper to keep an eye out for. Your university will send you a Form 1042-S. This is basically your official receipt for the year. It shows how much scholarship you got and how much tax, if any, was withheld. You have to attach this to your tax return. It's the proof. So there you have it. That's the blueprint. You get the right tax ID, you use the W-8BN as your shield to stop that initial withholding, and then you file a 1040-NR to settle up at the end of the year. The rules are complex, but the path forward is pretty clear. Which leads to one final thought. Now that you know the what do you think is the biggest real-world hurdle that stops students from getting this right? It's something worth thinking about.